Everyone, and welcome to the June 2nd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. We'll call this meeting to order at 1 o'clock p.m. Ms. Fennessy, can we do a roll call, please?
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start roll call. Chair Escobedo,
Here.
Vice Chair Bonderson,
Here.
Commissioner Bauke,
Here.
Commissioner Higgins,
Here.
Commissioner Lodge,
Here.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Here.
and Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Fennessy. We'll move on to preliminary matters, and we'll start with Ms. DeBusk. Are there any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have none.
Thank you. And how about any announcements or appeals?
None.
Thank you. So that'll take us to 2C, which is review, consideration, and action on the following draft Planning Commission meeting minutes and resolutions. And we have meeting minutes for May 12th, 2022, and May 19th, 2022. And we have resolutions for 701 North Milpas, 25 Las Alturas Road, and 3239 Cliff Drive. Are there any amendments to the meeting minutes or resolutions? I'm not seeing any. Is there a motion to approve?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve items C 1 through 5.
Thank you.
I can second that.
So we have a first from Commissioner Wiscom, a second from Vice Chair Bonderson. Any discussion? Not seeing any. Ms. Fennessy, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. We'll go ahead and start the roll call vote. Commissioner Bauke,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscom,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bonderson,
Yes, thank you.
and Chair Escobedo.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Fennessy. And now we will open up public comment for items that are not on today's agenda. We do not have any speaker slips, but Ms. Fennessy, do we have anyone online that would like to give public comment?
I do have one hand raised from Steve Fort. I will allow you to speak. Give me 1 second.
You ready?
Give me 1 second, Mr. Fort. Okay, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Steve Fort, live on Grove Lane. I was actually just tuning in to make sure that our Cliff Drive resolution got passed, and thank you for that. Very quick comment. I just want to express support moving forward for the Planning Commission and the City Council to address this latest Picasso issue that's come up in our neighborhoods with the fractional ownership issue. And I just want to express support to the PC and the council to limit and or restrict that to the full extent possible in our single family neighborhoods. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Fort. Any other speakers, Ms. Fennessy?
Thank you. We have no further speakers on Zoom, and we did receive one written correspondence from Michael and Sandra Christensen that was distributed to the Planning Commission prior to this meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Fennessy. So with that, we'll close out public comment, and we'll move on to item 3, which this is an environmental hearing for a draft mitigated negative declaration, a public comment hearing for 601 Santa Barbara Street. And Ms. DeBusk, who do we have from staff giving a presentation today?
Thank you, Chair Escobedo. Kathleen Kennedy will be giving the staff presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just getting set up here. Okay, this is an environmental hearing for the proposed police station project proposed at 601 Santa Barbara Street. This location is also known as 119 East Coda Street. It's in the process of being changed to 601 Santa Barbara Street. So the purpose of the hearing today is to receive comments on the draft initial study and mitigated negative declaration, which we'll refer to as the MND, from the Planning Commission and the public. No action will be taken on the draft MND or the police station project today. My presentation will consist of these areas. First, I'll go over the background of the project, then the proposed project itself, a little bit about environmental review, the process steps. I'll go over the proposed mitigation measures for the project, our recommendation, and then next steps, because this project is a little bit different. We'll go over those. First, for the background, back in early 2018, the City Council authorized staff to begin a site selection process for the new police station. Staff considered all possible sites that could potentially meet some or all of the needs of a new police station. In November of 2018, the Planning Commission reviewed 2 of the proposed site locations. Some of you were on the commission at that time and may recall that. The Coda Commuter Parking Lot and the Louise Lowry Davis Center were the 2 that were reviewed, and all agreed that the Coda Commuter Parking Lot was the most viable location. In March of 2019, the City Council directed staff to examine the site selection criteria more thoroughly and to conduct preliminary environmental review for each of those sites. So there were 20 sites that were identified and analyzed, and then 5 potential sites were identified. And those are listed here: the Louise Lowry Davis Center location, the Coda Commuter Parking Lot, then the Coda parking lot with the portion of the EDD parking lot as part of the project, Earl Warren Showgrounds, and then the Sears property located at La Cumbre Plaza. In September of 2019, the City Council designated the Coda commuter lot as the preferred site for the location of the new police station. In March of 2020, the City Council designated the police station project as a community benefit project, and that would allow the applicant to request a height exception from the Planning Commission. The project went through design review by the Architectural Board of Review on 3 occasions, listed here in 2020 and 2021. And then in March of 2021, the Planning Commission held a hearing. You had a concept review of the project at that point, and then gave the project the height exception approval, which allows the project to be, have a height between 45 and 60 feet. There was extensive land development team review. We had 2 PRT, which is the pre-application review team reviews of the project. We had a few land development team reviews, which we used to call DART reviews, back in 2021. And then in November, the project was deemed complete, and at that point, we began the environmental review process on the complete project. So we'll go over the proposed project a little bit. Like I said earlier, you did have a concept review of the project in 2021, so I'll just be brief going over the proposal. But here's the vicinity map showing the location of the Coda commuter lot. It's at the corner of Santa Barbara Street and East Coda Street. The lot is currently a parking lot, of course. It allows permit parking during the day and then public parking in the evening and weekends. It's also part of the safe parking program for parking for people in the evening, and then also the Saturday morning farmers market. Brief project description for the police station portion, which is more of the office portion of the property. It would be 3 stories above grade and 1 story below grade. The highest portion would be approximately 53 feet. And then the parking structure is also 3 levels above grade and 1 level below grade, approximately 37.5 feet in height. Will be 236 vehicle parking spaces, 128 for the fleet vehicles and 108 for employees. And then there'll be 8 visitor parking spaces at the entrance to the building. Here's the site plan. So down here below, this is Coda Street and Santa Barbara Street to the right. The right side of the site plan shows the office-related uses, and on the left is the parking structure. The main entrance is on Santa Barbara Street, so you would enter here to drive, access the on-surface parking or the entrance to the building. Here's the Santa Barbara Street east elevation. So again, here's the entrance along Santa Barbara Street. This area back here is entrance to the parking structure. And this elevation is looking from Coda Street, the south elevation. So the right side is at the corner, the offices, and the left side here is the parking structure. This would be the entrance to the garage here on the left. In regard to environmental review, here's a quick overview of the CEQA process. Step 1 is, which this project has been through already. Is it a project? Yes, it is. We've done the completeness review. It's a complete project. We've looked at exemptions to CEQA and determined that in this case, an initial study is required. So the staff prepared an initial study. And then step 4, prepared a MND, mitigated negative declaration for this project. So the contents of the initial study that you have been provided, just a list of items in it, would be the description of the proposed project, the location and characteristics of the location, the existing environmental setting, the existing land uses, and then the main portion of the document is an evaluation of the significance of environmental effects of the proposed project. The issue areas in the initial study are listed here. The initial study includes an evaluation of each of these. I won't run through those now since we'll be talking about them later, but this is a list of all the issue areas examined in the report. And for each issue area, we make a determination in regard to the level of significance, whether it's significant, a known substantial environmental impact, whether it's potentially significant. If it's unknown, then further review is required, and often that is done in an EIR, Environmental Impact Report. It could be that they are less than significant impacts with mitigation, and those are actually the ones that I'll be going over with you later. These are potentially significant impacts that are avoided or reduced to a less than significant level with identified feasible mitigation measures. Or it could be determined that the impacts are not substantial or significant, or that, in fact, there is no impact at all. Also, as part of this initial study, we have the attachments. We've included the project plans for your review, also the ABR minutes, the biological assessment, and the tree report. We've included standard conditions of approval that we and you are very familiar with that are applied to projects. They would be applied to this project as well, and then the mitigation monitoring and reporting program to track the mitigation measures that are proposed. There are many other technical studies that were prepared for this project. We decided not to include them all. They are available if you'd like to review them. They're available on request, upon request. So we released this draft document for a 30-day public review period. We've sent notices to the neighbors within 300 feet, to the interested parties, to the county clerk, and we placed a legal ad in the newspaper. As required, we've submitted the document to the Office of Planning and Research up in Sacramento, and we started the public review period on May 13th. It ends Sunday, June 12th, and we recommend that comments be sent electronically, so you have through Sunday, the end of the day Sunday, to submit comments. We'd like to hold the Planning Commission hearing a little bit before the end of the review period. Often people are just now starting to review it at this hearing, so we have another week or so to accept comments. Please submit comments to me at this address or through email at my email address here shown on the screen. The best way to go through this actually is to go over the mitigation measures as opposed to going through each issue area. Some have no impact, so I'm going to just briefly go through each mitigation measure, and all of these have been chosen to reduce impacts to a less than significant level. So the issue areas that have mitigation measures included in the initial study are those that are bold here. So some of them do not have any measures that would apply. So I'll go over the ones that are in bold here. In regard to air quality, AQ1, construction equipment, requires that heavy-duty diesel-powered construction equipment be equipped with Tier 4 final or better diesel engines. And this would reduce emissions of diesel particulate matter during construction. We have some biological resources mitigation measures. Bio1 requires that a construction survey be conducted, and Bio2 requires a buffer zone if active nests are found. These would reduce impacts to nesting birds. Bio3 requires replacement of trees at a ratio of 1:1 plus 25%. There will be 35 trees removed as part of this project. As you know, there are a number of trees spread throughout the parking lot. All of those would be removed except for 9 that are along the north and west perimeter. So the trees would be replaced, like I said, at a ratio of 1:1 plus 25%. So that's a total of 44 trees. Also, Bio4 is a measure to protect the remaining trees, and this would reduce impacts to the trees. There are 3 cultural resource mitigation measures to ensure that the project would not demolish or damage any cultural resources on the site. We have some geology and soil mitigation measures. One related to the final geotechnical report. This is an essential services building, so project would require adherence to the final geotechnical report and must be consistent with the Essential Services Buildings Seismic Safety Act. And this would reduce impacts related to seismic ground shaking. There's a measure that addresses temporary shoring to make sure there's no impact on adjacent properties. Another measure in regard to dewatering. It requires obtaining a dewatering permit during construction. This would reduce impacts related to the shallow groundwater at the site and adjacent buildings and rights of way. And then GEO4 addresses the removal of potential former basement fill and replacement with engineered fill. This would address long-term ground stability during operations and would reduce impacts to that non-engineered fill. A measure requiring monitoring during construction in regard to paleontological resources to reduce those impacts. In regard to hazards and hazardous materials, HAZ1 would require proper disposal of soils. There are some elevated levels of arsenic in one section of the property, and that would be disposed of. And then an overall soil management plan is required to guide if cases of any other contaminated soil. This would reduce impacts related to hazardous materials on site. Land use and planning, there are a number of policies listed in the initial study, and these would be the mitigation measures that would address those related to biological, cultural resources, and water quality, and I've just listed those here. In regard to noise, there'll be temporary noise barriers required to be installed along the west and northwest boundaries of the project site during construction. So the north and northwest are those areas that are adjacent to existing buildings. There's residential uses in that area. And then the project is required to have a vibration mitigation program whenever heavy equipment is anticipated to be next to those residential structures. And 3, it requires coordination with the neighboring uses during construction to make sure that they are aware of the timing and what kind of construction is happening when. And then the emergency generator barrier requirement requires installation of a noise barrier on the emergency generators. And the last noise mitigation measure is in regard to the firearm sound attenuation. It requires that the project incorporate sound attenuation features into the building. So all of these noise measures would reduce noise impacts during either construction or during operation of the project. Public services and utilities, the project's required to prepare a solid waste management plan for construction, which would increase the diversion rate to 85% to generate less construction debris, and we would reduce short-term solid waste impacts. For long-term, it requires the project to reduce the amount of solid waste going to the landfill to less than 40 tons per year, and that would reduce the long-term solid waste disposal impacts. And finally, water quality. The project's required to have a groundwater dewatering monitoring program, requires monitoring of the groundwater during dewatering discharges. And then also to ensure that there's adequate stormwater storage capacity, requires that a stormwater management is able to operate under high groundwater conditions. And this would reduce impacts related to groundwater quality and quantity. The conclusion of the initial study is that all potentially significant impacts can be mitigated to less than significant with these 24 mitigation measures. Looking at these as a whole, the short-term construction measures are 21, the majority. There are only 3 or potentially 4 that are long-term operational measures. So most of them are implemented during construction and would no longer be applicable. The 3 that are for long-term have to do with noise, just the emergency generators, if they're used They would need to conform to those mitigation measures long-term. The same with the firearms if there's noise in the future. And also with the solid waste rejection, that's an ongoing, long-term operational measure. And then with dewatering, it may be a long-term requirement. If it is, it would need to comply with the water quality measure, but that's unknown at this point, so it may not have to in the future. So our recommendation is to receive comments on the draft M&D from the public. And in terms of the commissioners, no motion is required from you today, but we would like to have each commissioner provide comments, and we will include those comments in the minutes. Some questions to consider when you're thinking about your comments. Is the analysis in the document adequate? Are the mitigation measures appropriate? And do you have any specific edits to the document itself? And then next steps. Staff will prepare the final M&D with the public comment letters and planning commission minutes attached at the end of the public comment period, which again is June 12th. The project will go to the City Council for a hearing. At that point, City Council will consider the final design contract and make a final site selection. So because they're doing that, we need to have them be the body to adopt the final MND, and they'll be making the environmental findings at that point. And then the project would come back to you, the Planning Commission, to consider the development plan. You would not be making those environmental findings since they would have already been made at the council hearing. So you'll be considering the development plan only at that point. And then it would go back to the ABR for consideration of the project design approval and final approvals. Again, submit comments by June 12th to written comments to this address or email them to me at this email address. And that concludes my presentation. We have Julia Peugeot, our environmental analyst, here to help with questions if you have any. Brad Hess, project manager for the police station, is available also for questions. We have Adam Pohl from DUDEC. He's the air quality specialist with DUDEC. He's available in person. And we also have remotely John Davis. He's project manager from DUDEC, and he has managed this project, and he's available remotely, audio only, if you have any questions related to any of the other technical studies. He's in touch with his staff who've prepared all the other reports.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you.
So with that, we don't have another presentation, correct, Mr. Busk? Okay. We will open up public comment on this item. And we do not have any speaker slips, but Ms. Fennessy, do we have anyone online that would like to give public comment?
Thank you. If you would like to make public comment, please use the instructions on screen. And while we wait, I'll go ahead and announce that we did receive 2 public comment letters from Rich Unterman and Paulina Kahn that were distributed to the Planning Commission prior to this meeting. And at this time, we do not have any public comments, so I'll hand it back to the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Fennessy. And so we will open up the questions period from the commission. Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good presentation and very good document. Thank you very much. I thought it was thorough. I just have a couple questions. I don't know who they go to, and it'll probably, based on your answers, probably incorporated it into my comments. But on page 3 of the initial study, what does certification of essential services building by Division of State Architect entail? And actually, when do you apply for that? Does anyone have the answer to that? If you don't, that's all right. I was kind of surprised that that was in there.
Yes, that is a requirement. I don't know the timing of that. I'm going to say prior to building permit issuance, it needs to, for
That-
sure.
Yeah, after final approval of, yeah, okay. That's kind of what I thought. Okay. And then on the farmer's market, It states on page 6 of the initial study that the application is under review to relocate, and what's the status and timeline of that? Has that relocation, are we in progress on that, or where are we?
It is in progress. It's being proposed for Carrillo and State Street.
Right,
So I know the transportation planning staff is working with the farmers market on that. I don't have an up-to-date status at the moment, but it is under review and they're working on all the details on that.
okay, and there's no alternative locations at this point? That's kind of what everyone's aiming towards, is that correct?
Yes, that's the only location that's being reviewed.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the safe parking program was discussed, it's on page 6 and 65. So has a specific location of relocation been determined? The initial study discusses, other places in Goleta and in the city, places where the safe parking program is in operation. So have we actually picked a place that's been approved?
Commissioner Wiscom, it's a great question. We have not. We are looking at early 2024 to start construction. So we will be able to provide them with ample notice of the timing so that they can coordinate those efforts. We do
Okay.
not have a location
But
selected at
do
this
you
point.
you don't anticipate any problems at one of the existing safe parking program lots for relocation of these vehicles and their occupants?
At this point, I'm not anticipating any problems, but I'm sure we will have some,
Okay,
just the nature of it.
okay, thank you. So, Mr. Hess, what you're saying then is you're really going to wait on that until we actually get close to construction before you pull the trigger on that?
Chair Wiscom, or excuse me, Commissioner Wiscom, that is correct. We'll
Okay.
we'll be able to provide them again with plenty of notice
Okay.
so that they can coordinate that.
Yeah. Okay, and then also, on page 6, it discussed transportation and circulation, and the relocation of employee parking to Lot 10, and I think another lot, I can't remember which one it is. So has the traffic and lot capacities been studied? I assumed from the report that there was plenty of lot capacity to accommodate the employees that park in the Coda lot now. And I just wondered, do they all arrive at once? And, has there been a parking study done about the queue up of Lot 10 for them or any, if you could just give me where you are on that.
Commissioner Wiscom, while we are working with downtown parking to figure some of those details out, that part has not been studied yet. There is capacity at Lot 10. The interesting part about the Coda commuter lot is how many people park there from different areas of the city and then walk. So it'll be an ongoing process once this gets rolled out. They're still figuring out the rates. They're figuring out how that's going to extend to the other lots. So while they have a plan, it's not been released yet, but I'm sure that will go into not only the discussion, but part of the study.
Okay, and then will it also include a survey of these people that park in the Coda lot and where they actually walk to at this point? I mean, I'm just thinking that might be a good idea. So if they're better off in another lot, like the one up on Carrillo or something, then, they could be dispersed in more convenient locations.
Right, and that is actually one of the things I know that they are working on, is how do you figure out how to offer a commensurate rate or something that's as beneficial for them, but closer to their place of work. Because it is less expensive right now to park in the Coda parking lot and walk 6 blocks. But if they could park closer to their workplace, then it might be a win-win. So that's the goal.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and then I wanted to just ask a couple questions on the trees. We looked at the Las Positas path at Planning Commission, and I think it was for a coastal development permit, but I don't remember what else. But at any rate, and there were trees planted as a mitigation measure for those removed to install that path. So is there room for more trees along that path? That would be part one, and has that been coordinated with the Creeks Division in terms of planting more trees as mitigation for this project at Las Positas path? And also, the second part is there a specific location within Ealing's Park for the trees? And is that part of their, I think they have a master plan now, is that part of their master plan?
There is available area in the Las Positas multi-use pass area and Ealing's Park, we've been told. So part of this would be of the mitigation that they need to provide us with the actual locations and for either site prior to issuing a building permit. So we don't know the exact locations, but we do know that there's available areas in both of those.
Okay, okay. So that will be, when you say they will have to provide, are you talking about the applicant?
Well, yeah, the
Yeah.
applicant or the consultant.
Right, okay, okay. So there's further work to be done on the exact locations, but you're confirming that there's plenty of room for the mitigation measure?
Yes, and they may be planted sooner rather than later as well, so,
Which would be nice.
which would be nice.
Yeah.
It'd be yeah, further along
Yeah.
when construction starts.
Great, okay. And then, I think this is for Mr. Hess. On page 50 of the initial study, contaminated soils and groundwater, have any underground storage tanks been identified on the site?
Commissioner Wiscom, no. We did radar on the entire site, and there are no underground storage tanks.
Okay, so there won't be any surprises then on that front, okay. And then, I think this is also for you, Mr. Hess. Solid waste management plan, is it anticipated that the parking lot asphalt, the current asphalt in the Coda Street lot will be pulverized and reused on site, or pulverized and recycled somewhere else? I mean, I've done projects where we recycle the asphalt as base course somewhere or whatever. So are you anticipating that step?
Commissioner Wiscom, yes, we're planning on having that done off-site. It's a very tight site, and we are also going to be removing approximately 22,000 cubic yards of soil after the demo. So there won't be room on site to store that material.
Okay, so you're pulverizing it off-site too then?
Yes.
Yeah, I know
recycling.
there's special machines that do that, and they're, I think, few and far between, but at least they used to be, but, okay. And then, are there any other, what are some of the other measures that you plan to take to recycle materials? Are you going to, with the trees that come down, are they going to turn into bark mulch and things like that? I'm just curious, I'd just like to get kind of, I think it's 85% diversion, so I'm just trying to get an idea of, I know you can meet the goal, but if you could help us, and I think help the public to explain
Sure.
that. Thank you.
Commissioner Wiscom, it's, this building, the entire building is designed to be sustainable as a net zero building. So that's our goal. So that will absolutely translate into not only the materials that are selected to go inside the building, the construction materials, but yes, all of the green materials that are taken down as part of demo would be either composted and/or put in, chipped and reused. Same with the concrete and the asphalt and any other materials that we come up with that we can recycle and reuse.
Great, okay. That's a perfect answer to that. Thank you. And that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscom. Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Bauke?
Mr. Chair, I've got a number of questions for staff, and some of this is probably because there's a couple newbies here, and this is a project that's been around for a long time. Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy, for your description of the historical process. What I see lacking in the document, and it may be just sort of a Santa Barbara way of doing CEQA documents, is a description or cross-referencing in the document to the site selection process and the environmental documentation for that site selection process to come to the conclusion that this is the site that you're selecting to do, and then having a mitigated ND as to the actual construction on the site. It seems that we're missing that background and cross-referencing in the CEQA documentation. So that's my primary comment is all that documentation should be part of the record for this MND, because the public's actually brought up issues as to the site selection process and alternatives. So I think it'd be, something that we should probably do. So I just want to make sure that's in the document. So unless you have another way of doing that, but and maybe there was a reason that council has that you didn't do that. But I would think it would be helpful in defending this MND to have a documentation integrated into the MND. The other question is, and it's not clear to me, and probably this has been discussed, is what's the future for the existing police facility? It's for the public and myself, or Mr. Hess, maybe you can answer that question, but when this is built, what happens to the existing facility?
Got it.
Commissioner Balke, that's a great question, and I look forward to being able to answer that. That has not started the study yet.
Okay, thank you. That's the only questions I have. When we have comments, I'll make comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Belke. Other commissioner questions? Commissioner? Oh, Commissioner Wardlow?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Kennedy. This was a very helpful presentation. To number one, I echo a lot of the questions that Commissioner Wiscombe already raised and really appreciate her questions regarding the current market and what's going to happen to them. So first, I'd love to understand, is there, exactly this starts in 2024, and how long do you expect the project to go on, the construction?
It's, Commissioner Wardlow, it's a 24 to 28 month construction timing. If we start in early 24, we're going to hopefully end in mid 26.
Okay.
As far as the farmer's market goes, it will be, I'm anticipating that they will want to use the CODA lot as long as possible, but the improvements for the area in which they will be relocating will be done well in advance of that.
Okay, excellent. So there will not be a situation where the farmer's market does not have a home and that construction starts before?
That's correct.
Okay, that's wonderful. That was my first question. Second, so obviously CODA is a really important corridor for us as a community, and as this construction project is going to take a significant amount of time, how are we expecting the traffic flows to be impacted in the surrounding businesses? Have we really, do we understand what that's going to look like for our community as residents?
Commissioner Wardlow, some of that coordination will need to happen with the general contractor as it's, as they are selected for traffic management around the immediate site. And while I don't know a lot of the details, I will tell you that I'm acutely aware of how important that corridor is, as it's one of the few arteries that connects the west side from the east side. So we will do all that we can to reduce the impact to that to the greatest extent. So if we've got deliveries or a concrete pour or anything that's going to impact traffic, that we would just make sure that we're coordinating with the neighborhood for sure, proper signage, and then do it in hours that will be most effective and the least impactful. I hope that's an assurance.
All right. Well, thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. Commissioner Higgins?
Thank you. So why did you radar the surface?
Commissioner Higgins, I said radar, I meant X-ray. My apologies.
Why, you must have had something to go on to
It was
spend that money.
for discovery as to whether there were any anomalies underground that we needed to be aware of.
And there's some sort of phase one that was done, was the contractor Dudek did that, and they uncover sort of a records gap or something like that? Is that what happened?
I don't think it was a records gap, but it was, we wanted to do it for our assurance, and then as a result of that, there were 2 anomalies that were found. I believe it was just 2. One was we were able to dismiss, and the other is an archaeological thing that we will be resolving, if that makes sense.
I don't think I read that in the ND. Is that, or the document now, is that anomaly in there? I must have missed it.
It is under the cultural resources section.
That there's, you use the word anomaly? No? Something?
Historic resource, I think.
Okay.
Commissioner Higgins, the term anomaly is on the X-ray. So as an X-ray looks at something and can't identify it, they call it an anomaly.
That's what it is, yeah.
So-
Okay. So, and then the Native American representatives were clued into that, and everybody's tracking that, and really the only mitigation measure is on-site monitoring. Is that how the right context?
Sure, Commissioner Higgins. There was a number of cultural resource investigations that were performed, and as part of those cultural resources investigations, which are confidential, due to state confidentiality laws surrounding cultural archaeological resources, mitigation measures were identified, and those are included in the MND, and that includes construction worker training to identify any undiscovered resources. It includes archaeological monitoring. As part of the cultural resource investigations, the Native American tribes were contacted, as well as through the CEQA process. They were on the notification lists. And as well as a limited data recovery plan is going to be one of the mitigation measures. And that process includes a proposal that'll go through HLC, and then a final report that also needs to be accepted by HLC.
So we'll have Native American representatives on site during grading?
This particular anomaly wasn't of that, I'm not sure how much I can say, wasn't of a Native American background, and so that wasn't required, and none of the tribes requested monitoring for the
Okay.
site.
There was a statement in there about traffic sort of no longer being a CEQA trigger just because there's traffic. I mean, help me with that. Is that sort of how the state of California has evolved beyond just traffic impacts? So, and it relates to Commissioner Wardlow's comment about traffic during construction. Can you just elaborate on why that's not an impact under CEQA anymore?
Yes, Commissioner Higgins, back in 2017, I think that's when it was, the state of California adopted SB 743, which basically stated that LOS congestion traffic impacts were not to be a CEQA impact anymore, and effectively took those thresholds out of the CEQA guidelines. However, traffic safety thresholds are still part of the CEQA guidelines, and so regards to construction traffic, the city has standard conditions regarding construction traffic management, and those will be implemented.
I guess I'm wondering about the, broadly speaking, the distance between what we have to disclose in this document or CEQA and what we should disclose, because it's a public works project essentially, and so sort of maybe tagging onto the lines of question by Commissioner Bauke, what's your sense for what we should be disclosing about alternative sites on the front end, and maybe some of this extra disclosure for construction impact related traffic? Can we do that at a more comprehensive level? Not because we have to, but because we should?
That type of analysis doesn't typically go in a CEQA document per SB
Right.
743.
So
And so
that's
it's
my
out of my
point.
realm of
We do-
expertise.
Yeah, I think I understand that we don't have to, but can you?
It can be disclosed, but it cannot be identified as a significant impact or mitigated.
Okay, but so you can put, maybe add some color to construction-related traffic impacts, road closures, business closures? Or do you just want to avoid that at this point?
For construction-related, if it's tied to more of a traffic safety design feature, we can include some more language about that.
Okay. On to visual, the visual section of the MND. Well, first of all, I started with the bio part, which I was a little bit shocked at how much energy and time went into a bio report. And while that's probably good to have, I didn't find that there was the same level, this is not a question, sorry. Not the same level of effort on the visual impact assessment component. And so I guess my question is, what, and there aren't any mitigation measures, so there's nothing really to talk about, but what are typical mitigation measures for potential visual impacts? General question, not pertaining to this project.
Commissioner Higgins, a few years ago, the state of California adopted a statute regarding to infill projects, and that visual impacts or visual character impacts for infill projects in an urban area are not to be identified as significant. And so outside of CEQA, those types of visual impacts are often addressed at the design review boards.
So maybe legal question, but is it fair or unfair for a project to have a mitigation, to have subsequent discretionary review by a design review board as a mitigation measure?
Commissioner Higgins, there would need to be a nexus to include a CEQA mitigation measure in that it results in a significant impact.
Well, I guess you've put this document is sort of structured based on the fact that the Planning Commission already voted for the height increase because it's community benefit, but that to me is not really I guess my point is relying on another body to make a discretionary finding for a height increase wasn't really done in context of CEQA. It was done in context of it's a public benefit. And whether or not it's a public project or public benefit, there's still a visual impact because it does, this is a part of the document I disagree with a little bit in that you've identified that mountain views of the St. Inez Mountains are part of the context for evaluating visual impacts, but you're saying there are no visual impacts because the Planning Commission already voted to approve the height exception. Those two things are, to me, are not connected. So maybe my point is, in this document, there ought to be more disclosure about what you just said, which the state of California has determined that infill projects cannot be found to have visual impacts because they're infill, and we kind of leave it at that. Is that a fair suggestion?
Commissioner Higgins, we can include more information about that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, even before the height limits were dropped by the city council, notwithstanding Measure B, we have a height limit that used to exist at 60 feet. And I would assume that the foundation of a visual impact assessment is, look, it's less than the height limit. So it is what it is. You don't have to answer that question. I just would like to be there. This is a project that's going to attract a lot of rear view mirroring after it gets built, like Chapala 1 did with height limits, and I think better disclosure on why it's not a visual impact is important at this juncture. and not creating the construct that because the planning commission or the design review board already voted on it, that's not a CEQA issue. That's a different discretionary body.
Understood.
Another question about water. And you've got in here, I won't try to pull it up, but the water disclosure was based on an institutional rate of 0.17 acre feet per year. Is that about right? Per 1,000 square feet? Sorry to throw you off there. So my question is, what is that institutional rate? What informs that institutional rate? Is that hospitals or libraries, or what is that? Because to me, it seemed a little low. If a house is about 1.5 acre feet per year, and this is 10 acre feet per year, but yet it's a building that's got a ton more floor area and people in and out of it, it seems low. So if you don't have the answer, that's okay. Maybe for the final version of this, I guess my comment would be some more information in there about what the institutional rate is. We have a lot of people out there in the public that are naturally concerned with our water use, so that rate seemed a little low to me.
Commissioner Higgins, I do not have the exact answer for you, but I can tell you that the institutional rates are based on local rates in our water demand study, and it does include multiple inputs of the types of uses. I just don't recall, does it include hospitals? I don't remember the specific uses that counted towards that, but we do have a water demand study that has all that information.
Maybe we could get some disclosure about how much water the current building uses? Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Other questions from commissioners? Vice Chair Bonderson?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I have a few questions and a couple tag-on continuations of previous commissioner questions. I'll start with one of those. With regard to the cultural resources, first I want to say that I was really pleased to see CR1, the Workers' Environmental Awareness Program, as part of this. I think that's extremely wise, and considering the possibility of finding remain archaeological items here, I'm really pleased to hear that that the Native American communities have been represented and maybe involved. That being said, I'm curious to know about particularly Geo 4. In case you don't have it handy right in front of you, I'll just read the title for you. It's the former school basement fill. Found this to be really interesting since we know that there's a former Lincoln School footprint down below. My curiosity was, since we don't know exactly where that's located, and part of the excavation will decipher where that is located, whether it's completely on the property or not, do we expect that the footprint of the proposed structure will go below the basement, existing basement location, the lowest point of the basement location? I didn't have a chance to look at the plans, and I didn't have a background on where that basement might be located. Can anyone shed any light on that for me?
Yes, Commissioner Bonderson, excuse me, I appreciate that. The over-excavation for the foundation that we're going to need for this size building will most certainly go below the basement of the school.
Thank you. I'm assuming that's what the X-ray procedure was for, to see what may be possibly found below that. Is that where you were X-raying?
That, as well as if there were any other things we needed to be aware of.
Excellent. And I'm curious to know, obviously we have some mitigation opportunities offered in this document, but is there any possible chance that something cultural or archaeological that might be found during construction and excavation may hinder this project in this location and possibly eliminate it altogether for that level of depth in the proposed project?
Commissioner Bonderson. Typically, my expertise in archaeological resources is not profound, but typically at a certain level, there ceases to be any archaeological resources, and depending on the type of soil. And so in the cultural resources reports that were done, they identified mitigation measures that are in the MND that would mitigate any unanticipated discovery of resources. And so if something was encountered, the archaeological monitors would be on site, work would stop, the resource would be studied, and we would determine the appropriate actions from there.
Okay, so it's as we go. That's the mitigation. Okay, very good. I understand, and I accept that answer. My next question has to do with traffic. Following up on the previous commissioners who have talked about this. At this time, obviously, we all know CODA is I'm sorry, not CODA, it's Santa Barbara Street there. Let me see, is that right? We're on the corner of CODA and, is it Anacapa?
Santa Barbara.
No.
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara. Yeah, I had to think about that, which way I'm going on the one way. Thank you. I didn't want to say it wrong. That's obviously a one-way street. Has there been any discussion with transportation, circulation, having to do with making that a two-way street for the purposes of handling either construction or even police needs after the project is completed?
Commissioner Bonderson, we didn't explore all of the facets of your question. We looked at it as to whether or not changing it to a two-way street below CODA. So it's a two-way street up to Haley, and then it becomes a one-way street between Haley and CODA. So we explored making that a two-way. As the project developed, however, it was a greater concern to actually protect the building by taking out the parking along Santa Barbara Street adjacent to the building. The reason for that is you don't want any nefarious characters driving up and parking a car that has something bad in it that's going to damage everyone and everything in the building. So we created a bump out at the lower corner. We kept it a one-way street, and then that traffic will continue in one way. We didn't find any advantages of changing it to a two-way below CODA. So we didn't explore the future, but in terms of construction, but the haul routes will use Santa Barbara Street, go into CODA, come out Santa Barbara Street, and then continue north. So that's the traffic flow.
Got it. And for construction, obviously, there's a flow that you guys have sort of created to help with your work.
That's correct.
Okay, good. My next question has to do with the vibration topic, N1 and 2. And I thought it was very thorough, the way that it's been documented here, having to do with how you're working towards any type of protection to the adjacent buildings. And I wanted to know, a lot of the mitigation provided here has to do with if something is not too much. For example, if construction conditions do not cause something, then implementation would not be needed. How are you guys handling the fact that if something is more extreme, is it similar to the archaeological setup where you just stop everything and rethink it and redocument it? I'm just concerned about the impact on the neighbors, not only with vibration, but also with noise.
I guess I'm curious as to which portion you're referring to in the document. That would help.
Of course, not a problem. I have it open here to, this is N2. It's vibration mitigation, and I just happened to read the last section of that box. if construction conditions do not cause heavy equipment. I was curious to know the other end of the spectrum.
And that's page 62 of the MND.
Thank you, Chair Escobedo. The way I'm looking at it, it's page 10 of 15.
Apologies,
helps.
page 10 of 15.
Or the end of page 9 and the continuation on page 10. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure quite how to answer. So if these, this is referring to if certain things happen, prohibit operation of equipment within that area, to try to use other kinds of equipment that's less impactful. We would have to do some sampling. I mean, if things happen, it might have to be worked out on site a little bit.
I guess my question, just to make it a little bit more clear to help you, Ms. Kennedy, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make it complicated. In the event that there's a noise issue or a vibration issue that's impacting the adjacent structures, how would that be handled?
Commissioner Bonderson, the project would include a project environmental coordinator who would be on site during construction to ensure that the mitigation measures are being implemented, and that PEC is required to report back to the planning division to ensure that those are being implemented. And if there's anything that's not in line with the mitigation measures, then we would work with the applicant, make sure what that would be, and see what would needed to be done. Part of the MND includes a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. Is that an attachment? And that's part of the attachment to the MND. And so that shows who is responsible for implementing each mitigation measure and the timing of that mitigation measure.
Perfect. That's actually exactly what I was hoping to hear, and it completely check marks my question. And just to wrap it up, my final question has to do with that. For the neighbors and people from the public that may not have the same sort of knowledge on where to find these types of documents, will there be some sort of phone number or contact information posted on the construction barriers, the fencing and so on, that a neighbor could just walk up and find if they need to contact someone for this sort of assistance?
Yes, that's correct. They're required to have signage with the project environmental coordinator's phone number and others. Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. That's it. Mr. Chair, back to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. Commissioner Lodge, did you have any questions?
No, I was able to get Ms. Kennedy to answer them before the meeting.
Thank you. All right, I have a few questions unless, Commissioner Wardlow.
I have one other question, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Hess, for your explanation that, you know, there will not be a scenario where the farmer's market does not have a home that they are happy with. Question for staff is there anything we can do to bake that into this in any way? I don't want to see, a year and a half from now that the farmer's market is really not happy with the proposed location that they have and that they're still trying to go through the process with the city to get approved. Is that something that we could add in here, or is that not an option? Just to make sure that we don't end up in that situation, in 2 years from now, a year and a half from now.
Commissioner Wardlow, I don't believe that the farmer's market, that would be a significant impact. And that's why it was not included in the environmental document. Whether or not the commission feels that that's an important condition of approval for the project in terms of land use and the development plan approval, that's a different story. But that's why it wasn't included as mitigation in this document.
Thank you so much. That clarifies my question. I appreciate it. And then that will be at the next, when this comes back, we can discuss that. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? All right, I'm going to jump in. So, as it relates to air quality, I remember there's going to be solar arrays for this project. It's going to be a net zero building. But I think I recall when this project came to us previously, there were also going to be diesel generators as a part of this project. Is there any plan to add battery storage? So maybe that's the first go-to if we have a power outage. It does happen since we're in a high fire area, it could happen. Mr. Hess?
Chair Escobedo, yes, absolutely. That will be the first thing that happens is, and the general setup is that the emergency generators are there as an insurance policy when power goes out, that they'll have sufficient power to keep everything running, primarily dispatch. So dispatch actually has its own generator solely devoted to that space. The larger generator would be for the entire rest of the building. There will be numerous battery backups, whether it's a UPS for a particular computer or a large battery bank that's going to be continually charged so that it's ready. Because it's an all-electric building, that will be very important. None of that has been completely sized. We're still figuring out the loads. As you may be aware, the fleet is going to try and do all-electric vehicles eventually, so we're preparing all of those loads and trying to figure out the sizes of those things, but it's absolutely in the plan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And another question, it's for a layperson like me, I'm just interested. So when we talk about proper disposal of contaminated soils, what does that look like and where does that soil go?
Chair Escobedo, I don't know where it'll go yet. There were differing opinions on the level of arsenic and whether or not it's just acceptable as part of the fill or whether it's a hazardous material. It's a very fine line, and there was some disagreement, so we're being on the conservative side for sure, and we're just going to get rid of it in those particular areas. You'll have to stay tuned because I actually don't know exactly where it will go, but it will absolutely go to a, I'm not sure what the word is, but sanctioned location and cleaned and disposed of properly.
Okay, so it gets cleaned and then does it get used for another purpose that we would need soil, or does it just stay in that sanctioned area? Is it reused is what I'm asking?
No, it goes to a special landfill, and I think that's also overseen by the County Environmental Health Services. So they will let us know where it should go and what should happen to it.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. In this process, we're going to see the development plan come back to us. We saw what the process looks like, but in terms of a timeline, generally, when can we expect the development plan to come back to Planning Commission?
So this should be going to City Council on June 28th, and then back to you July 21st, I believe.
Okay,
So very soon.
thank you, Ms. Kennedy. And Ms. Kennedy, in your presentation, you had mentioned that there are other reports available upon request. What reports are those, if you have them on hand, just the title, and how would one go about requesting those if we have a community member interested?
So they are listed on page 85 of the initial study. Project-specific sources, information, so air quality, cultural assessment, a few different reports related to that, geophysical reports, paleontological reports, environmental site assessment, et cetera, a number of others, noise, sewer, hydrology. So they're all available, and they could email or call me, and I can provide them.
And your email for if there's anyone watching?
It is kkennedy@santabarbaraca.gov.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Kennedy.
it's also included on the notice of intent to adopt, the notice that went out.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And Mr. Hess, you had mentioned, I forget which commissioner asked, what will happen to the current police station? Where in the process will that be decided? Is that a part of this project, or is that completely separate outside of this current project?
Chair Escobedo, it will be outside of this project. I'm just hoping to have it.
Yeah.
So the planning for that will probably begin within a year or two.
Okay,
We have to start planning for that because it's going to take a while.
thank you, Mr. Hess. Those are all of my questions. Commissioner Higgins, I see your light on. Did you have questions? Otherwise, we can go into comments.
Yeah, I do, and I'll think of another one that is escaping me, but on the existing police station, I can understand you want to keep that out of this, but the narrative back to, well, shoot, I don't even know how long ago, 25 years ago, when we started talking about this, was that there was some seismic issues, or the police station is not seismically safe, or I shouldn't say that, upgraded to today's standards. So at some point, I think it'd be helpful, and I think as we try to define what the CEQA issues are versus the project issues, as Mr. Buskin referenced, there's just proper disclosures, I think, that we ought to be making to the public about, if it's not in the CEQA document, I get it, but it needs to go somewhere. And you don't want to have any nexus or connectivity between what you disclose about the existing police station and this. Otherwise, it screws up your entitlements. I get that, but just fair disclosure about is that building coming down, or is it going to be repurposed for something else, adaptively reused? Those are questions I think a lot of people are going to want to have answers to at some point. And okay, my other question, sorry, and I'm really blending the line between questions and comments. Sorry about that. That escaped me again. Oh, why does this need to go to council in a month or two?
Yes, so at the next council hearing regarding the police station, they'll be approving the contract for the design team to go forward with this project. So it's actually a final site selection. They had made a preferred site selection earlier for environmental purposes to get the project going. But because it's a public project, by having those funds go towards this project, essentially making this final site selection. And because of that, we need to do the environmental at that point. It's different because it's a public project. If it was a private, that would not be. But the city is making the determination that this is where this will be by expending those funds.
Why, you just confused me. So
It is confusing. It's unusual.
So the city council is, I was with you until the point you said you're going to do the environmental because you're happen to be at the council for some
No,
public contract awards, but site selection?
It's because they're making the final site selection, and they're doing that because they are granting that contract to do the work.
So doesn't it seems that Commissioner Bauke's question is a really good one. Shouldn't you have more disclosure about that in this document?
Well, we can in the report that goes along
Yeah.
with that.
The staff
We have a lot
report
of
or-
disclosure about the site selection. There have been numerous reports that have been published related to the site selection and all the environmental, hundreds of pages of documents related to that are in the public record already. But we could also include more background when we go to council, which we will have to explain to them why it's before them.
Well, I get your point, which I won't put words in your mouth, but it's ironic when people show up to hearings and say, I didn't get the notice. The amount of disclosure that's out there is significant. I'm not asking to do much more work, but I'm just curious about the timing. If it's at the council for site selection, then it would seem natural to put more meat on the bone here with the other sites that were considered as part of this CEQA document, but I don't know.
Well, we will add, given the comment today, we will add more information to the document
All right.
before it goes to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner Wardlow?
Just one more question. When you say that we're unclear of what we're going to do with the current police department, there's not a scenario where we're keeping both, is that right? Like, this will be repurposed, is that the plan? And I apologize if this is a really ignorant question. I just want to understand, what are the options? Because obviously it's very exciting in the idea that, a area of, that could be used for potentially housing per se, would now be a new use. So I'm just wondering where where that is.
Commissioner Wardlow and Commissioner Higgins, anything that I say will be speculation because it's got to go through a process of what's the highest and best use of 1.1 acres in between Figueroa and Anapamu Street. It's a great location. It's a great location for a lot of things. As far as the condition of the building, in 1959, they didn't have seismic standards that we do now. So I can't definitively say it will be coming down, but it's an incredibly cumbersome building because everything is concrete. It was built like a bunker because it needed to be. So
But there's no use for 2 police stations, right? I just want to be clear that
No.
we're not going to have it, it'll be a different purpose.
That is
Great,
correct.
that's my question. Thank you. What that purpose is, we can figure that out after. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. If there are no other questions, we can now move into the comments period. Commissioner Wiscombe?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I just want to add one thing here. Could we put up slide, is it 47, Ms. Kennedy? Yeah, that's what I thought. Great, thank you. So this is what you'd like us to comment on, is this slide, is that correct?
This is just to prompt you in
Yeah.
case you need a little
Oh,
help
okay.
with that.
Well,
Yes.
I'll just follow this for my comments. So is the analysis in the document adequate? I think Ms. Peugeot and staff have done a really, really great job on this document. It's very thorough. It's complete and it's easy to read. I mean, it is and it isn't, but it is in terms of explanation for the mitigation measures and, why they're implemented. So and all the studies that have been done and the studies that are required prior to construction that haven't quite been done yet, I think they speak to more than an adequate analysis. So, and I just want to make a comment that the project environmental coordinator, I think, will play a very key role in the project as it moves on through construction. And that the project environmental coordinator will be proactive to assure appropriate mitigation measures are being used as the construction progresses. And there may be some changes based on things. I think that was one of Commissioner Vonderson's kind of questions. So I think it's really important that the project environmental coordinator, I think the duties are there, but they're not really part of the initial study. So if that could be, maybe that's an edit, is just to highlight that a little more. Okay, and so that kind of answers number 2 too, because I got into the project environmental coordinator. And are the mitigation measures appropriate? I especially appreciated the construction ones, the short-term ones. Things will probably change, things come up. That's where the project environmental coordinator came in. But I also especially appreciated the long-term operational mitigation measures that were included. I thought they were very thoughtful to the neighbors and and the surrounding community. So, okay, and then any edits. So I'm just going to go through this. These are kind of my thoughts. Regarding the safe parking program, I'd like you to be a little bit clearer about the precise timing and process of that. You know, it talks about the lots, you know, there are other lots available, but notification of the participants in that program with ample time, and also, you know, maybe a further study of the locations, so it doesn't become an issue down the road. And it's done and maybe just some comments about this is how it will be handled as we get closer to 2024 construction. That might be just a little bit clearer study of the a clearer analysis of the process in there. So the relocation of the Coda Street lot vehicles. I think that, again, could use a little bit of tweaking to be a little bit more clear. You know, my questions that came up, where do these people go after they park? Because you talk about they walk places and they walk various places. So maybe a survey, future survey when you get closer, and analysis of the reassignment of the potential places that they could go, and is there adequate parking available at the alternative lots? Obviously, you don't know that yet because you don't know, you haven't done a survey, you have no idea where these people go, and perhaps an analysis, a future analysis of impacts to traffic by relocation of vehicles. I mean, if they're all going to move to Lot 10 and they all start work at 8:30, are they queuing up at Lot 10 and creating a traffic impact? That type of thing. And then I think on the tree replacements for the mitigation for the trees that are being removed, I think it should be clearer that the replacement areas, which is Las Positas Path and Ealings Park, do have sufficient areas to accommodate additional trees, because there's been a lot of trees planted, and Ealings Park has the master plan. So just a notation about that you've actually coordinated that. And then I don't really know what to say about the farmer's market relocation. You say that the application is under review to relocate and that it's in progress. So I don't know if you can maybe be a little bit clearer about that process, because it's making people, or will make people nervous if, you know, something doesn't go quite right there. And I really don't know how to say that. And then the other thing that I'd like to say, based on some of the questions that commissioners asked, is there a possibility to put in the initial study under the project description that this does not include the old police station or the present police station, just so people understand that this is not part of this project, and that will be defined under a separate project after or while this is getting constructed. And I don't know, do you have any questions on those? Is that okay? Those are my comments, and thank you very much. I thought you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Commissioner Belke?
Mr. Chair, just a couple comments. First off, I've spent a good portion of my professional career reading CEQA documents. Not that it's a fun thing to do, but this was actually done very well, very thorough, I commend you for all your diligence on this one. There wasn't anything I saw that was missing or a topic that wasn't touched on. The mitigation measures seem to be appropriate for the project. So kudos to that. I'd like to second the comments by Commissioner Winscombe because she's very thorough, and I basically agree with every comment she's made so far on this document. I definitely want to re-stress my commentary regarding the site selection process and CEQA documentation for that, and including the existing police station as to what its future may or may not be, so that's clear to the public. And the last comment I have is, since we are in commentary and since it's a little open, I do have concerns that I'd like to express to the Architectural Review Board when they see this again about, which is shown in page A207 through 210, regarding the tower. I have yet to see in Santa Barbara, or even on a Google search, a tower such as shown in this project that has such a blank facade. I don't know why that's the case. I saw versions that had windows in it and other things, but now it has a complete blank facade, which just, it lacks articulation. So either some kind of recess in there or a mural with tile or something, but a big blank facade on a primary street like that with that tower just seems to be not at Santa Barbara standards. So, and that's my commentary. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bauke. Commissioner Hagan? Oh,
I'm sorry, Chair Escobedo, before we move on, Commissioner Bauke, during the questions section, you had questions that were more like a comment. Did you want to include that in your official comments
Yes,
as
please.
well?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Busk. Commissioner Higgins and then Commissioner Lodge.
Yep, nothing new for me, but to summarize, do a little bit better, approach the visual section the way you approach the bio section. Sort of overcompensate or overdisclose that these are not impacts because of state law and not because the HLC found it to be compatible. Those are different things. Compatibility is not necessarily a way to address an impact. This is going to be a big, huge building in a sea of one story around it, at least on three sides. And so I want there to be better forewarning. You can't warn enough in certain circumstances like this, but the height limit, it is what it is under state law, because people are going to pull the alarm after this is constructed, I can tell you. A little bit better job on the water disclosures with how those numbers were arrived at for institutional usage, and maybe some detail in there about how much water the current building uses. And that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Council Members Wiscombe and Balke about the thoroughness of this analysis. It was a great job done. And I think the mitigation measures are appropriate indeed. So, good job. I'd like to add a little historical perspective, because the comment letters that we received and so on, I don't know what the history of this building is. I was first elected to the City Council in 1975. It's otherwise 47 years ago. At that time, the building was the current police station, was 17 years old, and it was already scarily inadequate. There were just so many things wrong with it, and it's holding way more people than it was designed to hold. It's spread out to, 3 other buildings? There's 4? Yeah, there are 3 other buildings in addition, because there wasn't the room, like the, what do you call the call center? Yeah, it had to be moved someplace else. And the building behind on that lot that fronts on Anacapa is part of the police department services, as I recall. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Lodge, it's the annex property on Anapamu.
Okay, so it's essential, and we've been working, I'm so glad to be at this point, 47 years later, that we're finally on our way to getting a building that will contain all of the police services, and I assume it's been designed to accommodate any increases that are needed in staff and services. So ever onward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Commissioner Wardlow?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff, and thank you for the presentation and for addressing all of my questions. This has been really helpful. I echo the sentiments of my fellow commissioners as well as their very great questions. Commissioner Wiscombe was very thorough, and I really appreciated that. I definitely agree with the idea that this is going to be a project that obviously has already been very scrutinized by the public and has caused a lot of consternation, but is something that is definitely needed. And so it's exciting that we're at this point, and I really commend all of you. The analysis, I think, was great and adequate, and I appreciate it. I feel like I learned a lot. The mitigation measures I do find appropriate, except for I would love to see a little bit more, to Wiscombe's point, about notices to the public, because I agree that, you know, we can send a few and you'll still have people come up and say they didn't know that this was happening. And I think it's really important that we get ahead of that as much as possible. So the more community engagement that we can do to our surrounding businesses and really educating people on the impact that the impacts of traffic that will happen because of construction, I think is important. Thank you again, staff, for addressing my concerns and noting that we will be able to properly address and really discuss the importance of ensuring that the farmers market is properly relocated prior to any construction taking place. I appreciate that. And other than that, that's the remainder of my questions or comments. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. Vice Chair Bonderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree that the document is very thorough and the mitigation measures are adequate or appropriate as listed on the questions here above. My only specific edits to the document are really focused on some of the topics spoken about today. I'm going to reiterate Commissioner Wiscombe. I believe that the parking analysis should be included. It should be completed and provided in this document, and also a study with regard to traffic, both during construction and possibly in the future after construction is completed on Santa Barbara Street. I found the explanation to be adequate for today's conversation, but I believe that it requires more formal study and a formal decision to be made. Whatever that decision is to be, that's fine, but I think it needs to be documented along with the process. And other than that, I echo the sentiments of everyone. I believe that we've covered a lot of really important issues here. Commissioner Higgins and Bauke and Wiscombe have covered so many things for us. I just want to echo that it's really important here to make this document as detailed as possible, simply because more is more for a project like this. We're being highly scrutinized for a project like this, and this document is going to live on with this property for years to come, long after you and I are all gone. You know, if it's put in the street files, if it's put into the archives, whatever it may be, this document is going to be worth every minute that you all spend on it. So I just want to commend you all for your hard work. This is not an easy document, not to write and not to read, but I really appreciate the time and the attention that's spent on it. And I think you're really close. Please just, you know, take our comments to heart and do your best to complete the document and make it more detailed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. Any other comments before Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. I meant to mention this before. There have been comments about the farmer's market. As I recall, it was originally thought that they would go to De La Guerra Plaza, that it would all be tied in with that, and it's the redoing of that. It's another project Mr. Hess has under his management. And the decision to go to a farmer's market centered around Carrillo and State was made by the farmer's market, as I recall. Is that correct, Mr. Hess? Thank you. I just wanted everybody to know that. They decided on that location. So it was their choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. And I will jump into my comments. So I agree with most of what's been said, particularly from Commissioner Wiscombe. I'll highlight a few points from my fellow commissioners. As it relates to the safe parking program, I have a particular interest in making sure, as Commissioner Wiscombe had mentioned, that there's adequate noticing and that there's a planning process that occurs not just a few months before construction, that there is a conversation with the folks using the safe parking program there. I thought it was a good suggestion from Commissioner Higgins in outlining the state law that refers to infill development and the visual resources. I think from the public comment that we got, that was kind of the first place that they went, was the visual resources. And to get ahead of that and educate the public on that portion of the MND would be really helpful. I'll talk about this again, is battery storage. I really want to see, as much as possible, us avoid using those diesel generators. And if there's battery storage that we can rely on first to delay us having to use diesel generators if we ever have to use them, that's a big concern for me. And then I think that for these three questions, the analysis was amazing. So staff, you did an excellent job in answering our questions today. And thank you so much for the work that you put into this document. It's really well written. The mitigation measures are appropriate. And aside from the points that I had mentioned in my comments and my support for many of the comments made today, no specific edits, but I do have some constructive criticism or feedback rather, is for a document of this size and for when it's coming to Planning Commission and it's released, and I don't believe it changed from the release date, it'd be nice to have it further in advance than a week so that we get more time with the document. I understand that we could have just downloaded it, but it would have been nice to have it when it was released in, I forget the date, May 12th. So just a little bit of feedback, but other than that, well done, and really appreciate you and all the work that you did here. And thank you, Mr. Hess, for being here and answering our questions. And with that, is there any other comments? Staff, do you have any other questions, or was that adequate?
That was great. The comments are very good, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. All right. So with that, we'll close out this item, and we will move on to the administrative agenda. And it is committee and liaison reports, and we'll start with the staff hearing officer liaison report.
I'm going to have to punt until next time we get together.
Okay. Commissioner Wiscombe?
Are we on to other committee? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, sorry. We're on other committee and liaison reports.
Okay. I just wanted to announce, we have the De La Guerra Plaza Revitalization Advisory Committee. Mr. Hess, I'm sure I didn't get that right. Meets tomorrow from 8:30 to 10:30 at 6:30 Garden in the Gebhardt Room, from 8:30 to 10:30. And the agenda's posted, so you'll know what we're discussing tomorrow. It should be an interesting meeting. We're going to move into some topics of art and Uh-oh.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's been the outreach or participation, I should say, in the folks that office over here, the tenants, and how engaged are they? Or any participation on the committee for
There's,
people that?
Brad Hess has been coordinating with several of them throughout the
Are
project.
they members of the committee?
No.
They're
Are they
like-
members of the
I mean,
committee?
yeah,
No.
Okay, right.
No, they're not members of the committee, but he has talked with quite a few of them throughout the project, and quite a few of them came early in the process to speak during public comment when we used to hold our meetings in the
Yeah, I
conference
recall
room.
when I
Yeah.
was on that, there was some participation by
Yeah.
some of the wineries. I just am hearing a lot of anxiety about changes.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there will be, but, I'll just, to tell you, we've been at this process for over 2.5 years as a committee, and there's been ample opportunities to
Well,
express
yeah,
that. I
that
think
cuts
as a-
both ways.
Yeah.
The longer the process, the more you can lose people too.
Yeah, that's true. But but I think, it's been well advertised, all our meetings, and we had some participants from the public at the last meeting, the joint meeting that we had with HLC. So if anyone is interested, tomorrow from 8:30 to 10:30 at 630 Garden Street in Community Development, Gebhardt Room, that's where we will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscom. Commissioner Lodge, and then Vice Chair Bonderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a report on the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of May 25th. The first project is 101 Garden. And Ms. DeBusk, if you could, oh, it's up there. Thank you. Thank you so much for accommodating me in this, because it makes so much of a difference having pictures to look at. This is the view from the corner of Garden and Yananali of this new, I use the word new. This is a very old project. It goes back 39 years ago, which is when I, as mayor, signed the documents relating to it, the specific plan. And it's been carried forward. It's been in each of the general plan updates since then. And at last, it looks as if it's going to actually be built. So it was something that was considered in working on the general plan in terms of, how much more hotel accommodations do we need and so on. So it will be 120 standard guest rooms and 130 extended stay guest rooms. And they're trying to, in the architecture, to distinguish between the two parts. The man who started this project, Bill Wright, was very fond of, I'm thinking Monterey, yeah, it is Monterey, style architecture, and he was insistent that be, and he died relatively recently, and his heirs are carrying on with it. So the building on the corner is Monterey style. But then, next slide, please. The rest of it is in more standard Santa Barbara style. This is the entry from 101 Garden. And then the next slide, please. And this is looking from the railroad crossing up Garden Street. Part of the specific plan included putting Garden Street through in this way, and it was a big project. And as I recall, Mr. Wright contributed a lot in terms of the cost and so on, or
Commissioner Lodge, not in terms of the cost, but in terms of the land.
oh, okay, he contributed the land and so on. So this is, it's been in the works for a long time. The project will be coming to us for approval of a parking modification, development plan, and coastal development permit. The city council next Tuesday, June 7th, we'll be considering limiting more new hotel projects because of already what's coming along. And this project actually coming into fruition is an additional reason why that is something that should be seriously considered. Okay, then the next slide, please, Ms. Kennedy. Oh, okay, you've got all three of them up there, good. The upper left image is of the existing frontage on 1815 State Street. The next, on the upper right, is the proposed appearance, and below is the site plan. This is, to me, is a very exciting project. It is in, it's not in the priority overlay, but they are converting office space to housing. And where there are now, you can see in the upper left image, a part of a old craftsman style house in the back that's also used for offices now. Under the current zoning, they could construct 12 units. They're working with staff. This was concept review before HLC, and they're working out all the terms of it, but they're using the state bonus density, with state bonus density law and city bonus density, are hoping to build 12 units. And because that driveway that you see on the upper left, with the arrow going in, is not necessary, they are able to remove it, turn it into outdoor living space, and they've broken up the additional buildings, the new buildings, so that, and then they're using a 16-space car stacker system to accommodate the parking, and there is an alleyway in the back that goes out to, what would that be? Not, I can't think either, but to the cross street, the State Street, so that they don't need that driveway. And HLC was, I think the last time I reported on HLC projects, they didn't like either one of the ones I reported on. But both this and the hotel, as far as the design was concerned, they liked them both. So I hope this is a project that does go through. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge.
May I make a comment?
Absolutely. Commissioner
Mr. Chair,
Wiscombe.
I'd just like to thank Commissioner Lodge for the photos or the renderings that are included. I think that really helps us understand. So thank you for going to that extra effort.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lodge.
Google Street View and screenshots are great.
Yes, they are. Vice Chair Bonderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to say thank you to Commissioner Lodge. It certainly makes your liaison report a lot more interesting than the normal format. I don't have any visuals, so mine aren't going to be quite as nice to talk about. But I do have 4 projects to report on from ABR. And the first one is a project that several of you probably will remember from previous years and previous presentations. It's a project at 116 East Coda, and it came to ABR for review after final approval on April 18th and again on May 2nd. So they've seen it twice since we last spoke. And the purpose of that review after final approval was a request for landscape changes. The project required substantial conformance to the plans that received final approval way back on April 24th, 2017. So since then, the project has also had a revision to its project description, which I think is worth providing here today, especially for those of you who may be familiar with the project. So the new revised project description is for a project that uses the AUD program, and it's going to be for a new 4-story mixed-use building on a vacant parcel that's adjacent to Plaza Veracruz. It includes 28 studio units, a 1-bedroom manager unit, 16 covered parking spaces that are at ground level, and the residential units will be on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. The project's proposed height is 45 feet, and it also has a rooftop deck. The residential density is 116 dwelling units per acre, and the maximum density is 63 units per acre allowed for this site, so for this parcel. So it's also in the medium high density and uses priority housing overlay. So the reductions, the main reason it came back was because reductions in the planting area were proposed and they were accepted due to the construction nature of the building. So that's a little bit unique. I know some people are interested in that landscaping things in particular, Commissioner Wiscombe. So if you're particularly curious, that's something that you might like to look into. So on May 2nd, this project returned to ABR on consent, and it did receive that approval for a review after final. The next project is also a revised project. It's 219 East Haley Street. It returned as a continued item on April 18th. And the last time that this project received review was in January 2020. So we're seeing a lot of these projects that have sort of been on somewhat of a hiatus coming back to us now. This project has also been revised. In this case, it's to a larger building. It has an average unit size of 741 square feet. Building is proposed to be 48 feet tall and versus 45 previously. The project also added a private rooftop decks and access to the units. So there's a bit of a redesign here. It's also important to note that this is a mixed-use project, so there's actually going to be 2 commercial spaces as part of this project, and there's 37, it uses the AUD program, medium-high residential, so 37 to 63 dwelling units per acre in the priority housing overlay. And its goal is to demolish 7 existing structures, 8 residential units, and a construction of a 4-story, 34-unit mixed-use development. And I'll just add one more detail. There's going to be those 2 commercial spaces I mentioned, plus 1 3-bedroom unit, 13 2-bedroom units, 19 1-bedroom units, and a studio. So that's a lot of new housing that hopefully will kind of encompass a large range of unit types. There's also going to be 36 covered parking spaces, for the residential units, and 3 additional that are for the commercial use. This project received revised project design approval, and it continued indefinitely for an in-progress review with some conditions and some comments. The next 2 projects are not so wordy. I'll make it quick. On May 2nd, a project came in for review at 414 West Cannon Perdido. It was also a continued item that came back for conceptual review. It's a project that consists of a 2-story, 2-unit residential building that uses the AUD program. And the proposed density is 25 units per acre, and it includes 2 covered parking spaces. And the project was continued with full board, to the full board with comments. And last but not least, if any of you are following the Chick-fil-A project, this is not an AUD project, just kidding, but it might be something that you'll find interesting. It came to ABR for the very first time for concept review, and the restaurant proposes to add a canopy for existing drive-through service, the service window at the rear of the building, but it also is planning to add additional vehicle lanes and a new menu order boards for the drive-through which is going to in turn widen the entrance driveway, reconfigure the existing parking lot. It's going to remove 15 of the existing parking spaces, and it's going to propose ultimately in kind of a new format to hopefully get the backup street traffic off the road. It also proposes a new bike rack, new stormwater treatment system, and other site improvements. And the landscaping requires consideration by ABR of an alternative landscape design. And for your interest, it was not received particularly well. Landscape, meaning the landscape was not. And the project was continued indefinitely with comments. So last but not least, the project requires compliance with project compatibility findings, urban design guidelines, and an upper State Street area design guidelines. So there's a lot going on with that site. So if anyone's following along, that's hopefully of interest. They are working towards solutions. So that's it for ABR. And I have no other liaison reports.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. And if there are no other reports, nothing from staff, we will call this meeting over at 2:57. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.